So we are working in this series on how do you be healthy. So a lot of what we do in complex trauma is because complex trauma often happens at such a young age in the life of a child. Much of it they don't remember, and much of it happened at a subconscious level. And so for a person to begin to heal and change, they need to develop a self-awareness. But I get a question all the time, which is, now how do we be healthy? What does that even look like? And so we spend time on that. And then what are the tools to actually get to becoming a healthier person? So that's why we're doing this series. And as part of it, we're basically going through the foundational material of Finding Freedom and React, which is understanding the 12 needs that are built into all of us. And so we're looking at how do I meet those needs in a healthy way? Because complex trauma programmed me to still try and meet those needs, but in an unhealthy way, in a way that is causing me problems today. So we've looked at food, we've looked at money. Last week we looked at sex, we looked at pleasure. And tonight we're looking at the need we all have for nurture. And so you can follow along as we go, add notes on the side if it helps you remember stuff. But I want to start with what is the definition of nurture? What does it mean when we say nurture? It's a word we use a lot, especially in reference to a baby or to, a small child. But what actually do we mean? And so by definition, it means, first of all, to feed and protect, to support and encourage, to train and to educate. So another way to say that is you're meeting their current needs, but you're preparing them for life. So that is all involved in nurturing. And so we do that by teaching them, by role modeling for them, and they pick it up through those two things, and we meet their needs in many different ways, okay? So what it recognizes is that when a baby comes into the world, they don't naturally know how to meet their needs. And so they have to be taught how to meet every single need that they have. They will have some instincts, but they won't necessarily know how to wisely meet a need. So if you left a child, they would still have the desire created by hunger, the need for food, but they would probably go and pick through stuff till they found candy. And then they would eat candy all the time because they thought that was meeting their need the best. And so they need parents to help them learn how to meet that need in a healthy way. So this whole nurture thing doesn't just recognize that we have needs, it also recognizes that life can be painful. Life can have difficulties and frustrations and stresses. And so a child is going to need to be comforted. A child is going to need to be given tools to deal with stress, disappointment, frustration, failure. That's all part of nurturing for them. And so what we're saying is it's not just physical needs, it's emotional needs as well. It's every type of need that comes into our world, good and bad, problems that a child is going to need help with. So if you then take that further, what you begin to realize is that every child is different. And so how I nurture my one child might be somewhat different from how I nurture the other child because they have different personalities. They will have the same basic needs, but they will have needs unique to them. And so to be a parent who's a good nurturer, I can't just do what I think is a good idea. I have to get to know my children. And I have to get to know my children intimately so I know what their deepest needs are. And a lot of those deep, deep needs, they won't even be aware that they have them when they're really small. And so part of being a nurturing parent is getting my child. And that takes spending time with them. So nurturing is not just about lecturing them or fixing them or teaching them skills. Lecturing is stopping, being present, and getting to know my child. Seeing the world through their eyes, understanding their fears, their insecurities, their dreams, their desires. That is all part of being a nurturing parent. Get myself mixed up here. Okay, next thing is that every child, because they're different, there will be a process that takes place in nurturing them. So you meet the physical needs, and then the emotional needs get added in as they begin to express those needs. And so then the needs they have as a newborn aren't going to be the exact needs they have as a 2-year-old. So your nurturing changes because they're growing up. And so you feed them with a spoon at 1, but you hope you're not still feeding them with a spoon at 15. That would no longer be nurturing. That would be stupid, and that would be spoiling them and messing them up. So nurturing follows a process that goes along with their growth and maturity and their ability to meet their own needs. So what you're doing as a parent is when they're a newborn, nurturing means meeting 100% of their needs. But realizing that as they get older, you're going to teach them how to meet their own needs, and you're going to meet less and less of their needs. That is loving. Some people from complex trauma, they get their sense of value by their children needing them. And guess what they do? They don't let their kids grow up because they want their kids to still need them. That is not healthy nurturing. That is a very self-serving thing that can really mess up a child. The final thing about nurturing is that to be a good nurturer, you have to be consistent. You're not a good nurturer if you only meet your child's needs when you feel like it. You have to meet their needs even on the days you don't feel like it. And so nurturing is not about how you feel. Nurturing is all about commitment to meet the needs of your child. So that is a definition. Now, having said that, I want to go to the next thing. And how does complex trauma factor in to nurture? And you probably don't need me to tell you up front, but it messes it all up. So if you grew up in a family where you didn't feel safe, that's complex trauma. Basically, you grew up in a family where you didn't receive really healthy nurturing. And so part of what you're dealing with now is you trying to learn how to nurture yourself, how to nurture your children, because you didn't receive good role models or good teaching growing up. So I want to give you a whole bunch of ways that complex trauma can mess up nurturing, not to discourage you, but just again give you a self-awareness, and also that you can begin to see things that maybe you're doing in your relationship to your kids that could be hurting them. Okay, so number 1, complex trauma does not nurture well. And what we always say with that is complex trauma takes place in families where one or both parents who are in a position of authority abuses that authority. And they basically say, I'm going to use my power not to serve those under me, but to be the boss and get what I want. And another way to say that is basically they are a narcissist. They're saying, everybody serve me. I want everything the way I want it. It's my way or the highway. And that's what the environment is that you grow up in. And that is not a nurturing environment. What you probably learned out of that is how to nurture that person in authority, but that wasn't even healthy. And you began to resent that. The second part is Often in complex trauma, the people in authority don't like kids having messy emotions. So if a kid cries for more than 10 minutes, they go, get over it. And it's not about that's best for you to get over it. It's annoying them, and so they want you to stop to make them feel better. It's a self-serving thing. But what they basically do is start to forbid, either they say, don't do that, or you just pick up, you're not to do that. They start forbidding certain emotions being expressed. So you can't show fear, you can't show anger, you can't be too sad, you can't cry, because that makes them uncomfortable. And so they don't comfort you when you're feeling sad, they punish you. And you grow up in an environment like that, or they want to quickly fix you if you have a messy emotion. So you cry for more than half a day, we got to get you to a counselor. Because we got to get this stopped, which means we got to get you fixed. So they don't ask why you're crying. They don't try to be there for you and be emotionally available. All that they're concerned about is fixing you, which means stopping that messy emotion. So you may have grown up with that. Then you probably learned that certain emotions got validation. Certain emotions were considered good because they made you strong. And basically that meant you weren't bothered by anybody. Somebody could beat the tar out of you and you wouldn't cry. You wouldn't give them the satisfaction of showing fear. And everybody applauded you as being so tough. And so that kind of environment did not create complete people. It created hard people. It created people who had to shut down their emotions and harden their heart, and that was praised and valued. That is not a nurturing thing. Then for some of you, you maybe didn't cry a lot, but you had lots of emotions. You wore them on your sleeve. So if somebody had something good happen, you jumped up and down and screamed and got all excited. And everybody started teasing you for being so emotional. And basically what they were doing was making fun of you as if saying your emotional expressionism makes you weird. It makes you odd, even kind of insane. It makes you undesirable. And so once again, you're getting a message that you can't express emotions freely. You can't be honest about your emotions because then you'll get made fun of and called names about how crazy you are and how emotional you are. So what happens within a family, instead of getting nurture, the child receives parents who aren't present, parents who aren't there for them, or parents who aren't safe. So you can't share your struggle because they're not safe to share it with, or parents who didn't understand your world. So this is the environment that is non-nurturing, and I would say most of you grew up in this environment. Or you grew up in an environment where you're constantly criticized, or parents set the bar at an unrealistic level, and you were expected to be perfect, and so you were always being told you should be this way. You should act like this or express things this way. Should, and you could never attain it. So you were always criticized as not being good enough and not pleasing them. You didn't receive validation or encouragement as a normal part of your growing up. You were somewhat ignored. You weren't given that kind of encouragement. And then if you had needs, they resented you for having needs. They made you feel like a burden. They made you feel selfish for expressing those needs, so you couldn't be honest about that either. Then there was an inconsistency. Some days They were warm and friendly and very present to you. And then the next day, cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. So you didn't know what you were going to get on any given day. And then they would blame you for their problems. So they weren't meeting their own needs. They weren't owning their own stuff. They were blaming you always for their problems and their outbursts. And that was a big load to put on your shoulders. I think as people begin to understand complex trauma, at some point they begin to realize they never experienced unconditional love. They got love only if they behaved a certain way. It was conditional on performance. But some then also realize that their parents didn't love them but used them. So they used them as free slave labor. Some of you have gone through that. They used them to take care of their needs or to be a trophy on their arm to show off, but they didn't really love them. And that is an extremely painful thing. And then for some of you, you were shamed by parents, told that you'll never amount to anything, you're a failure, all of that kind of stuff. So I hope you see that that is the opposite of nurture. That destroys a soul, not feeds a soul. And some of you grew up with all of those things. Now, I'm not done, so it's only going to get worse. Hang in there. Some of you had parents who didn't give you their love or themselves. They just gave you gifts. They tried to buy your love, and they thought that was nurturing, to give you things, but it wasn't, and you know that. Many parents never loved you in a language of your love language. So let's say they were a parent who felt loved if somebody gave them a gift. And so they thought that the way to love their children was just to give them all gifts. But let's say your love language is that focused quality time with a deep, heartfelt conversation, but your parents never once loved you that way. But in the parents' mind, they thought they were loving you great, but you never felt it because they never took the time to learn your love language. And that's a painful realization as well. We talked about them shipping you off to a counselor, or they nurtured you, but you realized it wasn't with the right motive. So as I thought of this, a bunch of things popped into my mind. And some of you might have been nurtured by parents as a way to manipulate you to do something for them. So we call that love bombing. They give you lots of attention and then say, would you do this for me? And it's nothing more than manipulation. Or they gave you attention so that you would nurture them. So they say, how was your day? And you would start talking about your day. And they would then say, let me tell you about my day. And you were there then to listen and nurture them. So you didn't feel in the end of all of that they really cared about your day. They were just looking for a way to lead in to talk about their day. And that was the higher priority. Or some parents nurtured you as a way to try and control you. And you received some of that. So they would say, I am controlling you because I want the best for you. Aren't I a nurturing parent? By controlling everything about you, because it's really I want the best. So they were deluded in their own thinking as to what was really going on, but those were the lies that they told to themselves. And then the final way that they can manipulate you through nurture is that they manipulate you so that you will tell them all your secrets. So they give you lots of attention. So hopefully then they go, tell me what's going on in your life. Are you seeing any boys? Are you doing anything with your friends? And they're hoping you're going to spill your guts to them. and that's not a safe parent. And so you learn too late that they weren't really nurturing you by showing interest. They were trying to find out stuff. Okay, so some of that, hearing that for you will have been a painful thing. Because what you begin to realize is, wow, I grew up in an environment where there was zero nurture. There was the exact opposite of nurture. No wonder I'm screwed up, and no wonder I don't know how to take care of myself. But let me say this. Every child is driven to find nurture. And so if they can't find nurture from their parents, they will seek for it in other ways. So let me go through some of the tools that children develop in a complex trauma family that are simply attempts to try and nurture themselves. So some of you will relate to these as well, but some develop self-soothing type of things. So I've had many clients who rock themselves when they go to bed, or rock themselves when they sit on a couch. And often they do it without even realizing they're doing it. It's just a self-soothing thing. I've had adult clients who will suck their thumb as a self-soothing thing. Some will pull on their hair, kind of as a way just to soothe themselves. Others will actually pull out their hair or twist their hair in their fingers as a self-soothing type of thing. That is part of that. Others, they will go to sexual masturbation at a young age as a self-soothing thing, or food as a way of self-soothing. So those are the most common self-soothing things. Then some go to self-harm as a self-soothing thing. So part of it is in self-harm, so I'm just going to use cutting. Part of cutting is if I'd rather feel physical pain than emotional pain, so I will cut as a way to soothe and not feel the emotional pain. Others, as I cut, it releases emotional pain. And so it becomes a very dangerous self-soothing thing. Another type of self-soothing is I will just be busy all the time. Distractions. So I will constantly be doing something so I don't have to think or feel. That is the only way they know to soothe all the emptiness and pain inside. And so again, many of you have probably done some of that. The next one is self-pity. So you realize that self-pity is initially an attempt to comfort yourself. Nobody else is feeling sorry for me, so I'll feel sorry for myself. But then you get stuck there because you go, this feels good. I finally validate my pain. Now I don't even want to change because I'm enjoying my little pity party. And it feels good to feel sorry for myself. And so people get stuck there because it first seemed to be a good self-nurturing thing, but now it keeps you stuck and prevents you from growing up and getting healthy. But it is very attractive. Some of you said, I am determined to get other people to feel sorry for me, so I'm going to pout all day, walk around with my lip dragging on the floor until somebody noticed me and asked me what's wrong. And so you've done all of that. Or some of you just say, I am going to be a spotlight seeker. So whenever I go into a new group of people, I'm going to find a way to be the center of attention. I'm going to go, everybody look at me, notice me. And it's attention seeking constantly as a way to get nurtured. Do you know what happens with that? You create what you're trying to avoid. You create an attitude in people that go, uh-oh, so-and-so is coming, walk the other way. Don't give them any attention because they are so annoying. And the very thing you're trying to get now, nobody wants to give it to you. So you're creating what you're trying to prevent. And that happens, sadly, in many people. Others, as a way of getting nurture, is I will do whatever I have to do to fit in with the group that I think is cool. Because if I fit in, that feels a little bit like nurture. To be part of a group, to be accepted, to feel like I belong. And so that can become an attempt at self-nurture. Other kids go, why do I even need nurture? That's for weaklings. I'm going to be tough. And they shudder down early. They become hard. They close their heart and say, don't have any love for anybody. Don't get close to anybody, because then you won't have needs and you won't get hurt and you won't need nurture. And so that is a desperate attempt at nurturing yourself. Others, I will quit something as soon as I fail or it gets difficult. So I don't know how to go through that and nurture myself and meet my needs. So the only way I need to know how to nurture myself when I fail at something or it gets difficult is quit. And some of you have done that as part of what you do. And then the final one is codependency. I will get in a relationship with somebody where they need me and I need them. And so we will nurture each other, but in an unhealthy way. So you can check off the ones that you used in your life as part of your unhealthy toolkit in trying to get nurture. So let's go to healthy tools. And let's develop this so that hopefully you begin to understand what healthy nurture looks like. Okay, so recovery is basically how I define it for people is I didn't receive healthy parenting. My brain is my current parent, but my brain parents me like my parents did. Negative, critical, beat myself up. So if I'm to recover, I have to learn to parent myself in a nurturing way. That is an important way to understand recovery. It is learning the skills to nurture myself. Because if I don't, and I keep beating myself up and putting myself down and live with a critic parent in my brain, I will drive myself to relapse because I'll get so full of pain and emptiness with no solution, no comfort, no encouragement, and no help. So learning self-nurture in a healthy way is vital to healthy recovery. So that means I have to get to know what my needs are. I have to get to know myself. So there's going to be a self-discovery. And as I get to know my needs, then I have to figure out, am I meant to meet this need or do I need others to meet this need? So I don't want to be running around everybody saying, please meet all my needs and I'm just going to sit here with my thumb in my mouth and you take care of me. I need to figure out that I probably need to learn to meet about 90% of my needs by myself. But I do need people to meet some needs. And so part of learning self-nurture is learning that distinction. Then I need to learn not just my needs and which ones I'm supposed to meet, I need to learn how to meet them in a healthy way. Because you want to know what happens with your good old limbic brain? It wants to meet your needs in ways that give instant gratification and doesn't think about whether it might lead to bad long-term consequences. So I want my cortex to be fully engaged to say, what is the healthy way to meet this need so I become healthier and good things happen long term. So there's a lot involved in learning to meet our needs. Then the next part, how do I get to know who I am? How do I get to know my needs? So that means taking time to figure out what I like, what I'm good at, what my personality is like, how I naturally am wired to think, to relate, to interact with this world. That becomes a discovery thing, and that takes time. So you're not going to learn to nurture yourself in 1 week. This is a gradual learning process. You have to be patient with yourself. I know somebody that told me a couple months ago that they had started a date night with themselves. So 1 night a week, they go on a date all by themselves. And they take a journal, they do an activity, they write down stuff, but they try new things. Stuff they've never done before, just to see if they like it, to see if they're good at it. And they're in a process, and they realize that part of getting to know myself is I got to get rid of some distractions and just be with myself, therefore a date night. And then I got to move out of my comfort zone and try new things, even though I might look stupid trying them. But that's how I get to know what I'm good at. And so that's part of the nurturing process. And then as I do that, I begin to realize I need to learn my strengths, my weaknesses. I need to learn my limitations. So I remember early on, I think in one of the first years that I was an addictions counselor, I had a client who said, I can do whatever I set my mind to do. And I said, that's a good Western slogan. I said, okay, let's say you're a high jumper and I set the bar at 20 feet. Can you jump over it? He said, yes, if I try hard enough. Okay, I said, I'll set it at 50 feet. Can you jump over it? Yes, if I try hard enough. And I'm going, what is going on in this guy's brain? He basically wants to be a guy with a cape that can do everything and not have a limitation. And so part of learning about myself and learning to nurture myself is realizing I can't go 24 hours a day without sleep all the time. I have limitations. And if I don't learn my limitations, I'll burn out. If I don't learn my limitations, I'll get so overwhelmed, I'll get angry, resentful, bitter, and I will not be good to anybody. So I need to learn my limitations as part of nurturing myself, and that means I need to learn where I'm vulnerable. So you might be at a point in your recovery where you can't be around people who are drinking. Now, that doesn't mean in 5 years you're still going to be like that. You might be able to hang around with people like that in 5 years and it not bother you. But don't get down on yourself because you can't do that today. That's just where you are at right now, and you have to accept that and know where you're vulnerable and put boundaries around yourself in those areas to protect yourself. And part of all of that, again, is forgiving yourself. Self-nurture is stop beating yourself up, but forgive yourself and learn from your mistakes, change your behavior. That's the best form of forgiving yourself. And then accept yourself, who you are, your personality, whether you're shy, whether you're a bit disorganized, whether you're super analytical with a crazy brain. Accept all of those things. Understand what makes you unique, which makes you special, and don't walk around comparing yourself to everybody and saying, oh, I just wish I was like them. Oh, I wish I was like them. You are who you are. Learn to accept that and set realistic expectations for yourself. I listen when I'm working with clients to how often they say, I should be doing this. Because when I hear shoulds, then I go, is that a realistic expectation or an unrealistic expectation? And often it's an unrealistic expectation where they set the bar too high and then punish themselves all the time for not meeting it. Next one, nurturing yourself means treat yourself with respect. Don't beat yourself down. Stand up for yourself. Set boundaries to protect yourself. treat yourself with respect. And that means change the negative tapes in your head so that they don't keep playing every time you're struggling, and be patient with yourself. Okay? Now I want to add just a couple more. So a lot of times when people hear about self-nurture, they think I need a day at the spa. And so self-nurture is, let's get my fingernails painted and let's go and have a day of pure relaxation. There's a part of that that is part of self-nurture, but don't think that that's all that self-nurture is. Self-nurture also means that you want to nurture character in yourself. So think of it in terms of your children. If you're a good parent, you go, I want to meet their needs, but I want them to grow up to be an honest, responsible, considerate, caring person. I have to help build that into them. So that's nurturing character into them, and that means you have to nurture that in yourself. So what you're saying with self-nurture is not, I'm going to stay where I am and be lazy and just require lots of relaxation. Self-nurture is, I want to keep growing. And I can't keep growing unless I plan for that, unless I work towards that. That is self-nurture. And then you have to nurture new habits to be able to do that. So you have to say, if I'm going to get healthy, self-nurture to nurturing your children is you got to get up at this time, eat your breakfast, make your bed, and get ready to get on the bus. And you train them with habits. The same is true with yourself. You can't just say, I'll get up when I feel like it. That does not train healthy people. So you have to nurture new habits within a person. And the final area of nurture is that nurture is building relationships as well. So you're building character, you're building habits, and you're building relationships. All of that is self-nurture. So hopefully you see that is a big topic. That is something that you're not going to learn just tonight, but you're going to learn that hopefully over time as you begin to do it. But I hope you realize that unless you learn to nurture yourself, you'll never get healthy. And if you never get healthy, you won't be the parent you want to be to your kids. You won't be the partner that you want to be to somebody else. And you'll hurt yourself and often end up in a relapse.